everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullas Show. Today I have with me Jared Rosenthal. Now, Jared is a trailblazing entrepreneur, and I don't know what that means crossing, through the mountains on the way to get to the West Coast, which used to be the old trailblazers of past in American folklore. And he's a former healthcare CEO who redefined success by embracing unconventional ideas. After a decade in non-profit healthcare and serving as CEO of Amerigroup Illinois, where he managed over 400 employees, Jared took a bold leap in 2007, crossed the threshold into an entrepreneurial life, leaving the corporate world to launch his own venture. With no outside funding, he created 𝓲𝓪𝓻𝓷, starting with the now famous Who's Your Daddy mobile DNA testing truck. Look forward to finding out more about that, which captured national attention and inspired the VH1 reality show Swab Stories. He transformed his initial venture into a thriving tech company serving over 50,000 companies. So we're going to discover how his innovative marketing and calculated risk-taking led him to success. Jared, welcome to the show. It's great to see your smiling face from the other side of the Pacific, or next to the Atlantic in America, where I'm in Sydney and you're in the heart of New York in Manhattan. So great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So Jared, you've been in sort of like the healthcare industry for most of your professional career. Even I think your degree at Michigan was even in that space.
Correct.
So, uh, so you worked. What inspired you to get into healthcare? Was it something? Was that just what your parents thought would be good for you? Was it your own decision? Because I'm always
Yeah.
curious about um, because some people sort of follow the path the parents sort of set them and they sort of go that way, then they say, I'm over this, I want to do something else and want to do something for myself. So
Right.
so was there a curiosity about healthcare and health?
You know what it was? I was really in a bind in college trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to do things to, as many colleges do, more idealistic and wanted to sort of help save the world and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I was always into business and I always wanted to, I was selling baseball autographs when I was in fifth grade, writing away to players and selling them for 25 cents to my friends and stuff like that. Always starting businesses, worked, my own business through college. And you know it just was the finally hit me that this was a way to synthesize those two sort of feelings that I had. One of being in business and running something that made sense, from that standpoint, but also a business that's really a human business and can work with people and hopefully have a positive impact. So initially, I did that as after school, started in a nonprofit, and then sort of went to the other side of the world, which was the exact same business, but it was a for-profit, publicly traded company. So I got to see sort of both ends of how these things can come together, if they can actually come together. Can something like healthcare really be done for profit in a way that benefits people?
Right. So that corporate um, career, how long did that last?
Well, I was in the nonprofit for 10 years and then about 3 years in the for-profit.
Right. So you obviously must have got to a point. They said, I want to do something different. And so I love, basically the mobile DNA testing truck, Where's Your Daddy?
Right.
Okay, I'm really curious about where that came from. Love the name, by the way. And
Thank
obviously got you a national attention because it turned into a reality show by the sound of it. Um, so what was the inspiration? Was it like a night out with friends? Was it a bolt of lightning? Was it turned up in a dream? How did it happen?
you. Okay, well, so when I started the company, we initially just bought a used RV, and the idea was really the drug testing. So we were going to go on site and test people at factories. Pull up in front of a factory, they would send the workers out, we test them and send them back inside. So, we needed an RV because it had a bathroom. That's where you do the urine collections, right? So initially, I put a basically a urine cup, on the side of the RV to sort of advertise the services. I painted it myself. At the time, I was, trying to do everything, bootstrapped. So I was the first worker. I learned how to do the drug testing and the breath alcohol testing and became a trainer and started training people. And then I would call them up when I had a job and say, hey, come on out, let's do it. Um, and people started complaining about the P cup on the side of the truck. They didn't want me parking on the block. They didn't like it. And at the same time, we were doing DNA testing, and a lot of people, the calls all the time for paternity testing. And it's like, wow, this is really interesting. How many people are interested? And why don't I put that on the truck? Because the P cup, the workers would see me coming down the block, and some of them would run when they saw it anyways. It's probably better not to advertise that, right? So we just had this joke, around the office, hey, who's your daddy? Because we're doing paternity tests all the time. And we actually had a contest in the office to vote what to paint on the new, to rebrand the RV. I was outvoted like 10 to 1. And, it was the privilege of being my business. I said, you know what, I'm doing it anyway. So it's kind of a calculated risk, I guess, because I knew it was a little risky that maybe it wouldn't, might piss off a few people. And occasionally it did. I definitely would say,
Well,
and I would move it.
that's an appropriate phrase. Piss off a few people. That was good
Right.
for the business.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
But
so
but
what?
did
So, what was the idea for the urine drug testing? Was that you worked for companies and said there's maybe a need for this, or
Right. I was doing occupational health, like one job, which probably didn't get into that bio. I was running occupational health clinics. So in New York, all the healthcare workers have to get drug tested every year, and a bunch of other occupational health services. And, I was interested in, well, what happens if a truck driver gets in an accident? They need to be tested immediately. How does that get done if it's the middle of the night? So in starting my own business, I thought to myself, what is the hardest part of this industry, this occupational health and drug testing industry, that I could, sort of elbow my way into because it's so hard and there's probably less people doing it. And, to also the margins can be better. So if you, go out in the middle of the night, 3 in the morning, and there's an accident on the Cross Bronx Expressway, and the business, by law, they need to get breathalyzed. Not This is not the police type of breathalyzer where there's any suspicion. It's basically certain laws that govern the transportation industry. After any accident, they need to get tested within 2 hours. And so now I put my name out there for 24/7 service, and we would drive out and do the test. So I saw the need for that, and the opportunity that could possibly be a
Hmm,
way to establish the business.
right? So you did that, and what was that business called? Because obviously the rebranding, which I love. What was your first name for the business?
Well, the name of the business is and still is Health Street. So it was
Okay,
health, right? And then the Who's Your Daddy was just sort of the product name or the branding for the
okay,
DNA testing.
okay. So you repainted the truck. What color was it?
I painted it. Well, the Who's Your Daddy went through two iterations, but one of them, what 𝓬𝓪𝓵 was a big sort of what do you call it? Candy blue, super bright baby blue.
Yeah.
And I had graffiti artists actually. These guys were friends of mine in the Bronx. These guys have started out, you know, doing it the illegal way, and got recognized as really good and started getting paid for doing graffiti. And a bunch of guys went down that route at that time. And but their work is just really cool. So it was very striking. Everybody loved it. We did it in that graffiti style. And literally from the day I painted it, the cameras were snapping everywhere. It was just wild. And within a couple of weeks, the New York Post was there, and they did an article, and then just kept going from there.
So what year was this?
2012.
Right. So you're right at the peak of organic social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point I came in the office, and my coworker saw something on there, and he said, "I think we just went viral." And I was like, "What's that?" Like it was kind of a new thing.
Yeah, because in 2012 I started jeffbullas.com in 2009, and it was just a passion project because of my curiosity about the impact of social media and bypassing
Mm,
gatekeepers so everyone could have a voice. But
right.
obviously in 2012, and so, but this was before we had the algorithms where the social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and everyone start imposing algorithms to stop visibility of people's normal tweets to make it possible to maximize revenue, right? So
Okay.
this is before algorithms really started to cramp the individual's voice uh,
Yeah.
and which started happening about in 2013, 14. So
Right.
but I think you would have gone viral any rate. because it's such a great name. So obviously you know didn't do a marketing degree, but you're just really good at this name. Was it like an intuition? You're saying, I think this might work. Did you do any research? I'm sure, or not.
No, no, no research. You know what? I was running, I ran national marketing and sales when I was at Amerigroup, and I remember thinking, something like this would never go over in a corporate setting.
No.
First of all, there would be 20 meetings, and you'd have to do all that research. And I just said, let me try it. You know what I mean? There was no, it wasn't much to it. It wasn't too expensive to get these guys to paint it. So, it was just like, hey, let's give it a try. I think one of the reasons I really wanted to be in my own business was because of those kind of things, right? I remember in corporate world, I would have an idea and someone would say, well, look, it's a good idea, but it's going to take a lot of coaxing and a lot of persuading and 12 meetings. And I said to myself, you know what? I don't like that idea that much, right? It's not that it really matters. Let me do things where I can get things done and not deal with bureaucracy. So going into your own business, that's a real benefit, if you want to just cut through the chase. And I had sort of the attitude too of, if I get it wrong, I get it wrong, and that's okay because I'm experiencing running the business, and
Mm.
it's not necessarily about always doing it right and having the best person and the best consultant and the best answer, but it's about, the experience of doing these kind of things.
So when did you know that it was going to work?
Well, the business, the first year, which was 2010, was rough. I had a few jobs I was able to get, and I just kind of didn't really know anything about SEO or web or anything like that. I just put a listing on Google, and a few people started calling, and I got, a little bit of my name out there. It started hitting in 2011, where I started saying, well, you know what? I'm getting a lot more calls. This would be much better business in an office building a call center, and rather than driving all over to try to do the tests, right?
Right.
Because you could get people in clinic. There's clinics that'll do these things, and it's often quite cheap. Maybe $10, $20 to pay for them to just do the urine collection or the swabbing of the cheek for DNA. So we set it up more as a call center, but we still kept that mobile in the New York City area, and as soon as I painted that truck, it was like instant, in terms of the 𝓲𝓵𝓵 hitting the media, New York being also very media central kind of a
Hmm.
place, the day that it was in the Post, I was on like 11 channels. They were just coming all day. ABC, Fox, NBC, just one after the next. Radio shows call. It was just nuts. I never really experienced anything like that. And after that, about 30 production companies called to try and pitch me on the show. So I was able to
Wow.
sort of leverage that. Yeah, yeah. It's like one of these things where they all saw it. I guess never really think about it, but they have sort of an idea for what makes a good unscripted show, and it's typically drama as well as a conclusion and an answer and sort of a reveal moment. So but it's sort of tailor made for this, and every producer saw it right away, and they all started calling.
So did that would have helped the business?
Well, my thought with that, because here's the thing, right? It wasn't really what I did all day. I wasn't driving around all day at that point doing just these tests. Um, but it would put my name out there, and it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity to sort of
Mm.
brand the business and say these are our values, the way in which I was able to talk to people on the show and give them information and help them through sometimes very negative reveals, right? So I said this is a better opportunity than anything I can do with writing um, articles or optimizing my website. I said, this is, it's given to me. I think, they spent, I don't know, several $1 million on the show. And I said, there's like millions of dollars of a marketing budget
Yep.
that I get to, lead the effort. And, not everybody, right? Let's say someone sees it in Texas and they want the test. Well, I have a clinic there, right? I'm not going to drive to Dallas, but more importantly, and this is sort of a hidden sort of value, is that Google and the search engines, they see and they draw the relationship between the business name and the product and the trustworthiness of it because of the exposure. So the person in Dallas that needs a test or San Francisco that needs a test, they may never have seen the show or heard of the show or anything like that, but they go to Google to search, and because Google has established that trust and that value, then they're finding me first, right? And then now I'm able to set that test up for them in their hometown.
Yeah. So did they pay for rights to the show, or you just treat it as free advertising? Did you get paid to be on your basically your own show that they actually funded?
Yeah, yeah, I got some payment. Generally speaking, the first year of any of these unscripted shows, people get very little, or
Yep.
if anything at all, right? But I was in a really unique position because number one, I was able to leverage the different, there was sort of competitive situation with all the people calling, and number two, it was my business as well, so there's a business access fee that they had to pay, and I was
Yeah.
going to be on the show, right? And I ended up being I was able to negotiate so that I could actually, they call it executive producer, which is just a fancy title, but I was able to sort of watch the stuff before it went to the network. So if I didn't like something, I was able to veto it, and it was a lot of work, but I was able to get as much of input as I could, which was very unusual. What I found, a lot of people I knew that were in similar situations, they didn't, first time they saw the show was when everybody else saw it on TV, and they didn't have that opportunity to have that input.
Did you hire someone to help you navigate that media landscape? Because it can be a little bit like, they've got teams of lawyers and everything, so, and they're
Yeah.
used to the game, whereas you're being brought into the game as a complete amateur, effectively. Did you use any outside consulting expertise, lawyers, whatever, to actually help you navigate this agreements?
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. One of the guys that was trying to get the show was working for a major network, right? I won't mention it, which one. And he said, "You got to do it with us." And I said, "Well, I also have these production companies calling that can sell it to networks." And he said, "100%. You could ask any lawyer in New York. You got to go with the network over the production company." And I said, "Well, that's funny you mentioned it because I need a lawyer. Can you give me a name?" And he said, "Sure." And he gave me a few names, and I called this woman, and she said, "Well, I don't know who that guy is, but I'd say definitely go with the production company, not the network." So that's how I found my lawyer.
Right. Okay. So, how many episodes did it run for, like the show?
One season, eight shows.
8 shows. Okay, right. So cool. Right, so you're paying the truck, you're getting attention, you're starting. So first year's tough, it's bootstrapped.
Yeah.
So your main marketing then was outbound calling from a call center in an office. Is that what your main marketing channel?
Inbound, 100% inbound. So, initially I tried to do some outbound stuff and reach out to businesses. But what I found in this business, and this is like one of these things where you got to know your product, right? And this particular product is not something that, brand awareness had a lot of value. It was when you need it, you go and look for it, right? And so it's sort of a perfect tailor-made for search, right? Because
Yeah,
when you're not looking for it, you don't want to get a call about, oh, you got to set up your drug testing with us. Maybe you're only hiring once a year, twice a year, three times a year. And then people aren't spending time worrying about it until that moment of hire. And then they go on search engine and say, where can I get a drug test in this area? And it's similar for the DNA test. Well, we could talk about that separate, right? But so basically, my job was to drive, I should say, my job is to make the phone ring, right? And then ultimately that became my job is to drive web traffic and online transactions.
right.
We still have a call center, but about 80% now happens online.
Okay, so essentially you started working on optimizing for search engine, in other words, SEO is, and how did you do that? Because back in 2011, 12, the web wasn't so crowded and it was actually a lot easier to get to rank number one and create inbound links. Whereas today it's getting, with the noise we have
Yeah.
online, it's got much tougher because I essentially created a lot of SEO authority. We've got, I think our website's got a domain ranking of 81 or 82, so it's substantial.
Mm.
Did you
Mm.
create it? How did you create that SEO authority and rank on the first page? Was it just content? Did you technically structure your site so Google liked, the site map and all that sort of thing? How did you actually rank on page one with and did you do research on the sort of the phrases people were looking for? Tell us about that, how you did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, first thing was when I sort of realized it's all coming through Google, right, in the beginning. And I said, let me find people that are expert in this, So I, sort of found somebody that was certified as a, Google Platinum, whatever they called it at the time. And really, I just learned from them and studied. The SEO is so much work, right? That
Yes.
for anybody who wants to do it, if you don't want to fully do it, it's probably not worth doing at all because there's so many different parts of it, right? Technical SEO is about a third of it. The content is about a third of it. And then, off page, other people linking back to you and talking
Yes.
about you is the other third. And within each of those thirds, there's a massive amount of work, possibly, right?
Mm.
We have a really big site. Our site is over 6,000 pages because we list separate locations for,
Yes,
all the clinics,
you're
right?
optimizing for local search, which is very,
Correct.
very important for you. Yes.
Yes. So really it was, through help that I had with others, but studying it as much as I could. And because I understood that that's where the volume was. And, for search terms for us, it was not much more than the product name followed by local terms. So drug testing, Los Angeles, California, drug test, New York City, that kind of thing. So we optimized for local because we thought those are the transactional searches. One of the things in this particular business and probably a lot of business is the same term could be used in a for informational searches as well as transactional searches. So if you search, a medical term, let's say, we do Occ Health also. So let's say TB test, right? There's all kinds of expert material out there, WebMD and all this stuff, right? But if you search TB test, and it would be very expensive to try and compete with that, right? If
Yes.
even if you possibly could, right? But if you search TB test Brooklyn, right? Now it's a totally different search, and we know 99% of that is transactional, whereas TB test 99% might not be. So you're wasting a lot of time and money for something that won't necessarily lead to a transaction.
Yeah.
So that's as simple as it was. It's the product terms and the local wherever we had a clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. So the competing for I suppose the transactional side is maybe the toughest and also the most lucrative.
Right.
So you got an expert in, obviously they did all the research on the different types and terms and their keyword volume. In other words, how many, you don't want to rank for a word that gets 3 clicks a month. You want to get ranked for a word
Right.
that gets, 10 or 20,000. So so SEO is a long game. So
Yeah.
how long did it take from starting to get serious about SEO until you started to see results? Because this is something a lot of companies don't get. And they like
Yeah.
all these SEO companies going, I'll rank you next week on page one. How long
No,
did it
no way.
take you? Yeah.
Years, really. It took years. It was a slow but steady progress, punctuated by a few drops, scary drops. And we could
Yeah.
talk more about what's going on now because it's a sort of a different world we're headed into or already are in. But SEO you own. This is the way I thought of it all the time. Like you mentioned about social, where you don't actually own
The
the
platform.
mechanism for them to, right? So you're putting material on their platform. And, I always thought of the website as, okay, that's my own domain, my property. And, it's more controllable. As it turns out, you're really playing in Google's world, right?
Yeah.
Because if they stop showing at one time we launched a new website, about 5 years in, 2015, I think, 2016, and a much nicer, beautiful site, and had a launch party and gave out T-shirts. And that night, I checked my phone, and there's no transactions. And I said, "What? We were doing X, millions of business on the old site, the ugly site. I said, put the ugly site back. This is,
Yeah.
and things like that happen, and they're not to scare people that haven't been through it. There are ways to figure it out, but it's treacherous in certain cases.
It is. So was the new website with a new URL and domain?
Nope. Switched at that point. We switched to WordPress, and
Right.
it's just there was a technical glitch with how the web developer did it, and it took 3 months to figure out. And it was a rough 3 months. I remember it was around the holidays, and I was like, "Why did I do this to myself?"
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gotta be stressed and everything. But now, years later, we've built our own web development platform. So we do everything internally and push it out. No WordPress. Everything is done through our internal system and a lot more controlled. No outside developers that can mess things up.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we change websites, I've got my own tech team that actually builds it because they know
Yeah,
it and because
yeah.
it can be easily stuffed up. And so let's fast forward to today,
Mm,
in terms of SEO and what's happening, because it seems to be quite volatile, doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah, it's extremely volatile. And if you're like we're selling a service, right? So we're a little bit, the impact of what's happening is a little bit delayed for us. Whereas if what you're selling is information or publication, you're probably feeling it a lot more. But Google did an update at the end of 2023, I believe,
Yep.
that was brutal, and some businesses just sort of fell off the face of the earth, and we got hit a little bit. We spent a ton of time trying to fix what we think is wrong. One of the trickiest parts of this game is that there's been times where there was an algorithm update where we dropped and then did nothing, and 6 months later come right back. And so you don't necessarily know. That's the thing, that they'll never tell you, and there's a lot of moving parts. There's competitors that are changing too, and no SEO agency in the world can totally predict the future and say this is what Google's doing. So they'll optimize you for what worked before, and hopefully for what's always worked, which is good quality and trust and good content, right? But they're not going to know, exactly what changes are coming down the road. So you're always kind of in this reactive mode. It's kind of the two steps in, two steps back kind of thing, the
Hmm.
Google shuffle, and I don't know. I think a lot of companies get addicted to the good rank and the business it brings in, and when they drop in rank, they panic and start to advertise more. So, maybe this was Google's intent all along, to keep shaking things up and get people to spend more money on on the ads. But it's a tough game. So one of the things I did wrong was to not establish more channels earlier on, right?
Mm,
Because that, too much reliance on one channel makes you a little more vulnerable.
exactly. So we've had the rise of AI in the last 2 years, and I'd be intrigued by your insights into how it's impacted your business and maybe how businesses should be using it, because you're on the ground, you're in the street, Hell Street, and you're trying to work things out. So I think part of the volatility I'm noticing is that Google's experimenting with search and AI and the intersection of those. So I'm seeing rankings going up, 10, 10 positions and drop the next day, then back again. And are you seeing similar volatility at that level?
For our core valuable keywords, we're not seeing that level of volatility, no. But in some of the ones where we didn't rank as well, it'll move up a little faster, move up and down a little faster. Um, I think what so there's different parts of the AI, right? So there's one is what Google's doing in terms of on their results page
Yes,
showing an AI summary, right? So you never have to go to
the
the other
website.
site if you see it right there, right? Then they might put the link, but if you already got the information you need, then what's the point? The other thing is just how they're changing their algorithm to, on the one hand, say if you have AI written content, or we think it's written by AI, we don't want to serve you up. But of course, they're doing everything using AI. So it's a bit of a conundrum there, right? And then there's, I think, just the fact that some percentage growing every day of searches are not going to search anymore. They're going directly to ChatGPT and
Mm,
things like that. And so they'll never get the the link or even this AI summary on the search engine,
yeah.
right? So those things, now if you're selling a product, then currently the AI can't sell you that product. But that is coming. That is
Yes.
definitely not far away. So, and what the scary thing is from a business standpoint is that then it becomes like an all or nothing game, right? Either if it's like your website can really function headless at a certain point if the AI is doing the work for the user and the AI is either going to your site or conversing through an API to your system, right? So now if you ask, oh, I need a drug test in Houston, Texas, it's probably only going to give you one choice and say, well, here's what I need. I need your name and I get you an appointment on Friday. What, but you'll probably store your credit card number in your chat client and they'll just book it for you, right? So now it becomes really, everything or nothing kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas at least before, if your number two in search is nowhere near as good as number one, but you're going to get something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the whole interesting thing about visibility on AI versus visibility, on search is we're in the middle of this huge change. But you did mention that maybe they're messing around with rankings,
Yeah.
basically to make people spend more money on advertising. Because what's interesting, if you have a look at the data, Google's revenue's gone up on search, Google ads, but its
Yeah.
actual search volume has dropped. And you might be
Right.
right. So maybe you've nailed that insight. Maybe is quite insightful because by confusion and by removing ranking, well, how else do I get visibility?
Right.
Because it's the game is visibility to get the click and then get the transaction or the information you need. So in terms of we've done some research trying to find out how can you rank in chat gpt because about a year ago I was interviewed by someone who's looking for bloggers that use AI, right? And apparently I turned up in chat gpt search regarding
Mm.
that, so I said that's good, but um, are you guys doing any research on how to appear in a chat gpt um, prompt, and what have you found if you have?
Well, what my thought was to turn our backend system into, create an API for external systems to be able to hit it, right? And then expose it using a common language like Open API language, right? So then basically what that means, if you're not familiar with it, is, API just system talking directly to another system, right?
Yep.
So just think about booking a flight. It's easier to think of. And instead of searching flights to Miami and they show you Expedia and whatever, and you go to the site and you put in your information and you book your flight, the API that the Expedia or whatever, airline has, open a, the chat can reach out and say, we have an API. What do you need to know in terms of booking a flight? And the API will respond, well, I need a name, I need a date, I need how many people, is it round trip, blah, blah. And then it'll ask the client, turn around and say, okay, this is what I need. And then it sends the information, and now that API then processes it just like if you were entering it on a computer. So my
Yep.
thought with how to optimize for AI was that's really the way ultimately that I believe it's going to go, and not ultimately meaning not too far in the future. Recently, they started this, operator I'm sure you've heard of, where
Yes.
they actually go on the websites and try and read it and crawl it, which is way more
Clunky.
yeah, it's clunky right now. It's slow. We're testing it out just to see what it's like. I guess the thought process for them must be that there's way more websites than there are APIs, right? Because you actually have to build an API to expose it. So maybe they figure they can just get a broader swath of the web. But it seems to me that if you could hit an API, which they can, right, already. Then that's going to be a much more effective way for them going. So then how do you then now it's no longer SEO, it's chat EO or CEO, right? You have to now market that to them so that they're aware of it if and when they allow you to, and that will be its own specialty trying to figure that out. But again, it will be more of an all or nothing kind of a thing. And And so getting out ahead of that, I think, is really important. So even though it's not here yet, right? They're not
Yeah.
storing your credit card on their system. It's clear that they will, right? I mean, that's another way for them to monetize it. Why wouldn't they try and do the transaction from the chat if they didn't have to send you to the site to do the transaction so that they could take a piece of it? So I think getting ready for that by creating an API or looking at Operator, get it for a month and see what it does on your site. Ask it to go to your site and get information and see how it reads it, and you learn all kinds of things. Like we learned. We didn't have a lot of accessibility features like ARIA labels, they call them behind the scenes. But like every button on the website, has this thing called an ARIA label. If you can put it on there, right? That tells a screen reader what it does. So now the chat is using a lot of that accessibility stuff that people use when they have disabilities. Currently, they're using that to help inform them of what they're crawling on your site. So if it goes that way, it's important that you know what it is that these operate they call it operator right now, what they do when they crawl your site and how they interpret it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've, hit the biggest trend in 2025, which is agentic AI. In other words, the use of agents that actually act on your behalf.
Yes.
And that's certainly, I think there's a whole bunch of them, like you mentioned, OpenAI or ChatGPT's agentic AI app, which is Operator. Um,
Yeah.
so it's yeah, what's I suppose all of us are struggling with is the velocity and amount of change that is happening.
Yeah.
It's not just change; it's the velocity of the change that we're struggling with, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's immense and it's never felt so unstable, looking out 3 years, right? Because it's very hard to know what's going to happen. I do think that productivity, like if you're running a business, you have to be able to use AI at least. Forget about the marketing side of it. You have to be able to increase productivity because your competitors will, right? And there are easy ways, that you can use AI to, speed things up. And it doesn't have to be everything at once. It could be as simple as, having your staff do research on there, or there's many things that used to take hours and hours to do that we can do now. That's a lot faster, more effective, and it's getting it's sort of becoming exponential.
Yep. So are you using AI basically to help you facilitate your customer service, your inbound calls or questions? Are you using AI for that yet?
We're experimenting with it. So I did something that I thought was pretty cool. It didn't end up being a huge impact, but basically when we have an internal system, we use FileMaker as our operating system, which is if you're not familiar with it, it's there are companies in Australia that use it. I know because I've seen them at these conferences, but it's the sort of the least known product from the best known company in the world, which is Apple. Apple has a division called FileMaker. And it's been a great product for us. We're able to build everything in house. One of the things we did was when the phone rings, when somebody picks up the phone, it pops up a screen with all the information about that we can get from the caller ID related to their records in the system. We have all their history, right? And that's what we were doing all along. And now what I did was, okay, as soon as that call comes in the background, I grab all of the history of that company, and all the tests they've done with us, how long they've been with us, are they using only one product line, or are they using multiple, and just sort of bundle it up, send it to ChatGPT, and the person is on the phone, talking to they can quickly see what the history themselves, right? But then if maybe 5 seconds later, 10 seconds later, the response comes in and it'll pop up and give them a bunch of suggestions and say, hey, um, maybe you should tell them to, you know, offer a different product line. Ultimately, was I that impressed with it? It kind of felt like it was a lot of marketing 101, right? Tell them to cross sell, tell them to upsell. I was like, oh, well, I could have said that, right? I didn't need to send all that
Yeah.
information to do it. But I'm sure that there's something in there if I keep pressing on it that we'll be able to figure out. Also, we have an experienced call center. We don't have a lot of new people. So if you're training, that would probably be a lot more helpful, right? For
Yeah.
new people.
Yeah. So how many in your call center currently?
5 people.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So and do you, the other thing that's maybe impacted, like COVID must have been a challenge for you because of
Yeah.
actual, uh, not being able to access, public access would have been difficult. How did you navigate
Yeah.
COVID?
Well, we were also doing tests in the office. So I had one in Brooklyn and one in the Bronx, and a few people in each. And we get walk-ins, so people would come in with their child to do DNA tests, and they would set the phone down. Somebody would do the test. We had truckers coming in for drug tests and that sort of thing. So with this FileMaker system, which I built myself, and I'm not a technical person by training, I was always very afraid that if we didn't have a really good internet connection, that it just wouldn't work. Like I didn't know, it was hard to know. But that's when I had to finally test it. And so we basically shut the offices. There's still the one in Brooklyn, but there's only one person there, and everybody went home. Some of them didn't have internet at all. So we basically paid for their internet, stopped paying for the office, saved a lot of money. And I tell you what, it's been so much better. Almost immediately. First of all, no one was ever late, right? They just roll out of bed and they're clock in and start working. And it used to be always somebody was late. Maybe big city, New York, it's always traffic, trains delayed. None of that, right? And the work, it turns out, was perfectly fine. FileMaker worked just great, in terms of the speed and we did a few things, to technically and have a VP of information technology that set things up. We have the database in Amazon, AWS, so some of that had to be there, but it really turns out it was much better not having a call center and. As a benefit, we don't have to clean up the pee after somebody comes in to do a drug test.
Cool. So, as an entrepreneur, it sounds like you've built sort of like your own tech stack, if you like. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what's been involved, a quick thumbnail sketch of what sort of tech
Sure.
stack you've built, because how it helps business be more efficient, and tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so like when I first got FileMaker, the reason I got that was because I said I wanted a product that I could, had a low barrier to entry, but had very high ceilings, and then that was sort of it. There's certain one, certain database. I remember looking at Microsoft Access back then. I don't even know if it's still around, but I said, that you kind of run out of running room at a certain point. So I bought a book, and it, was about a month of really just trying to figure out how to do the first setup of a database. But then ultimately, I have an internal system, right, that's running the office, but it's not communicating with the outside, right? They're going to our website, and even if I had a shopping cart, it wasn't, connected. And so what I was able to do ultimately, and so I basically run the inside, the FileMaker and the back end stuff, and then we have other staff that were able to hit that API essentially and expose a front end. So we built it in Vercel, so it's a Next.js app. It's written in TypeScript, and so basically now our clients log in and they set up their own testing. They search for clinics. They do everything that we can do in the FileMaker in the back end in the office. Now it's exposed to the front end through this web application.
Right. So you're making the basically customer experience pretty easy to use.
Yeah, that's actually the number one word on our Trustpilot. We got like 1,100 Trustpilot reviews. Easy. That's the number one comment that we get all the time. So we try to like leverage that in ways like, that's sort of what we're known for, that we've made the process easy. Because a lot of companies, you want to get set up, they could take a month to get you configured in their system and all this stuff, right? We do it immediately, hit the system, and they're up, off and running.
Right. Because it's the thing about business is actually, even with life, if exercise is too hard to do because you've got to go and put on, got to drive a car to get your kayak off and put it on the water and then get back and put it back in. Whereas,
Right.
and for me, I love running. I've been doing running for a long time. Actually, I did it for 40 years, and I switched to cycling. But I love about those sports is that low friction. Put my riding gear on, get on the bike, go. Want to go for a
Yes.
run, put on my running shorts, t-shirt, short, running shoes, go. So I think, and the same in business. You need to make it as frictionless as possible, don't you?
Absolutely. And I do a lot of stuff that I don't even tell anybody about because I just put it behind the scenes and make it easier, right? And they don't even necessarily know why it's easy, but I'm
Yeah,
setting it up that way. But even if you have, something as an example of just a shopping cart, the more steps you put in, the more friction you have and the less customers you're going to get.
yeah,
You have to make it easy for people to purchase the product.
exactly. So, what other areas? So you've got quite a spread of services on your site now. What the business does, such as DNA testing, drug testing, and background checks as well. Are you
Yeah.
expanding what you're doing, or just going to get better at what you do?
Well, we've been trying to expand. The occupational health is sort of our newer, growing area, right? And we've tried to focus more on B2B rather than because we do individuals as well as businesses. But the thing about businesses is they reorder. They're hiring all the time. Some of them have been with us since the beginning, 10, 15 years. So it's more valuable from an enterprise standpoint to grow with businesses. So what we've been trying to figure out is how do we get more of those, right? So it's a marketing challenge. On the other side, we've toyed, more than toyed, we've really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we can take our web building application and make it available for others, small businesses to use because it is so effective and useful for us internally. So making it generic and getting it out there for others to use, really a totally different line of business, right? Instead of just taking what made our business run well and maybe selling it to others. But we haven't marketed it as such as yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so the enterprise area, in other words, one customer but lots of business, isn't it? So that's would be. Have you explored things like subscription models? In other words, uh,
Yeah, we've thought about it. It's
yeah,
a tough one, right? It's a tough
it
one
is a
because
tough one.
it's a product, right? I mean, it's a service, but you get it discreetly. You get it when you need it. And so to tell folks, yeah, now it's $30 a month to use it. The Wall Streeters all want the subscription model. I'm not really even sure why, because this is a good business. Like, what does it matter if it comes in monthly or they reliably order 3 tests a year on average or whatever the case may be, but looking for ways. I would say my own advice on that for people that are thinking through the same thing. I don't think it's smart to start with the presumption of that it's better for your value to have subscription model and then try and force something into that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense, and it's probably not going to make sense to the customer either.
Yeah,
But it didn't stop us from really trying to think it through a lot,
yeah,
and look for little areas where that might make more sense.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a challenge you see sort of everywhere. Everyone's turning, even basically you can have sunglasses, physical products as a service. It's like you can get, X sunglasses a year. If you, it's just the list goes on and on. Like there's
Yep.
creative as a service. There's, so it's
Yep.
yeah. But you must really have a large enough pool, and you're not dealing in the big end of town where you got to crack projects and have salespeople involved. It's more like you just make sure you got a lot of inbound calls happening, and that comes down to being good with your search engine optimization and so on, isn't it?
Right. And other people in the space, competitors of ours, do a ton of outbound, and they wait for, government agencies to issue an RFP. It says we're going to need to test the whole sanitation department or whatever the case may be. And they'll spend a ton of time reaching out to companies and that sort of thing. It's just not my cup of tea. And I think if you're better at SEO, it's a better business, because
Yeah.
or I should say SEO, if you're better at driving inbound, it's just more effective. The people you speak to, it's more pleasant, right? They want the service. You're not trying to talk them into something. They're calling because they're interested in this product.
Well, I suppose you can do a lot of the education and credibility up front with content, can't you, before you actually need, so they can buy without anyone having to tell them.
That would be the goal. And another way we're using AI is we transcribe all of the calls, right? So we get about 300 so calls a day, and then I send them for transcription, and then I take all the transcriptions, and then I started sending them to AI and say, okay, give us the most common questions that people are asking, so then
Yes.
we could create content around those questions, and hopefully to drive, do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Do you use Google so like snippets to help you work out because will go through and provide 10 questions that are commonly asked on that search term. Use that as part of your optimization.
we try to get those, right? We try to be
Be
listed
the
there.
snippet. Yeah, be the snippet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Try to be this thing. Exactly. It depends on the search term. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Um, but like years ago before AI, what did everybody say? Like, what should you write a blog about? Well, the answer I always got was, well, what are your customers asking? What do they want to know that you know that other people don't know, right? And this is where is that issue of how you can be more productive. All I'm doing is taking the calls and getting transcriptions and then sending the transcriptions. And then now I have this visibility into what customers are saying. I can get a summary of 300 calls in a couple paragraphs, right? And then use it for
Creating
this
content.
marketing, right? For creating content.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's trying to create content that matters rather than just any content. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah. So, what are some of the biggest lessons you'd like to share? Just start wrapping it up. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur since you hit the go button, well over 10 years ago? What's some of the big lessons you've learned that
Um,
just two or three, one, whatever, what's the biggest lesson or lessons you've learned?
yeah. I mean, I think you have to have the right sort of internal fibers for the riskiness of being an entrepreneur. If you're starting your own business, if you're doing it at least the way that I did it, which was, you know, I say self-funded. It really wasn't much funding at all. It was just sort of grit funded, but never going out to take, big loans or investors, always plowing the money back in, from the retained earnings. It's hard because then you have to compete. Your personal priorities have to compete with your business goals because that money is either going into your bank account or it's going back into the business. And that's just different from working in a company, where you
Yeah.
can just advocate for a project. So that's a big one. And I think the idea of just like wanting to do business related things, if those are enjoyable to you. I think the biggest issue a lot of people have is they get into business because they're passionate about the particular topic, but maybe they're not passionate about business. And I think you need both.
Yes, you do. Cool. So, question I always ask my guests is if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day? In other words, what brings you real deep happiness?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate in that have done very different kinds of jobs, um, and I've really enjoyed most of them, or I say I've really enjoyed all of them, but most things about them, not everything about them.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed sort of getting into the coding side of this,
Okay.
but I would say probably if I had all the money in the world, I would go back to, managing hundreds of people and being able to lead and teach and sort of convey some of these lessons to, people who didn't have, excuse me, people that didn't necessarily have it modeled for them
Mm.
as a kid or in their neighborhood or at school or whatever, to show them, well, you can do it. This is how, this is the experience. Doesn't look like you're going to get there. But if you have that vision and you know that you can overcome these things, maybe
Yeah.
you're better off.
So you'd love to be a mentor, in other words, to help people with what you've learned along the way.
Yeah. Or be more back on the people side of it.
Okay. Right. Very cool.
Yeah.
Jared, it's been an absolute pleasure, buddy, and I've learned a lot just listening to you, and love the inspiration of painting the van, bright blue, candy blue, and who's your daddy? It's a marketing stroke, marketing genius. It's fantastic. So, and fabulous, and who doesn't want to get their business turned into a reality show? But maybe you don't, because it could go really bad.
It could.
So, thank you very much, Jared, and never know if we're in New York, I'll maybe find a quiet New York bar and have a beer or a drink or a wine, whatever. So, be great to,
Absolutely. Would love to.
yeah,
Pleasure meeting you. Really enjoyed it.
yeah, great. Thanks, Jared.
Okay, take care.